And then we can start letting people in. Yeah.
Oh, could be.
Good morning, everyone. We still have some people joining in the waiting room, so we'll give them a few more minutes and then we'll get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here this morning. The waiting room has slowed down, so we will go ahead and get started. First, if you guys could keep your mics muted, we would greatly appreciate it, just to help with the flow of things. At the end of our webinar today, Tim and I will do a question and answer, so you can put your questions in the chat box or wait until the end of our presentations to ask questions, and we would be happy to answer them. Pertaining for our voucher program that we are excited to have you guys join us for. All right, so thank you for taking your time this morning to join us. My name is Janelle Eck McHenry, and I work for the Delaware, Maryland 4R Alliance, and I administer a few of the programs with our grant funds. Today, I am here with you to share some more insight and information about our 2024 voucher program. In 2021, we did a pilot voucher program with successful results. We are happy to bring you all online for our 2024 program. We also have Tim Hushin with the Mill here with us today. The Mill is one of the agribusinesses that worked closely with us in 2021 for our pilot project. Tim will be sharing some insight from his experience and his results. We have received one nutrient management credit from Maryland, Pennsylvania, and the Certified Crop Advisors for today's webinar. We will share the link with you all following the question and answers for those interested in receiving credits. If you are interested in Delaware nutrient management credits, we will share a link with you in the question and answer period to submit for a non-approved event. The coordinator is aware of our event, but we did not provide enough time to get the credits pre-approved, so our apologies for that. All right, so just a little bit about who we are. The Mid-Atlantic 4R Nutrient Stewardship Association is a nonprofit entity that works closely with its local regional affiliates. The Delaware-Maryland 4R Alliance is chaired by Lindsay Thompson with the Delaware-Maryland Agribusiness Association, and the Pennsylvania 4R Alliance Executive Director is Eric Rosenbaum with Rose Tree Consulting. So our mission is to provide education to farmers on the economic and environmental benefits of implementing the 4R nutrient stewardship practices, which will be accelerate a progress towards clean water and habitat goals, while communicating to non-agriculture audiences by documented on-farm 4R successes and environmental outcomes. The 4R approach is about optimizing resources and finding the right strategies for your farm. The 4Rs refers to the right nutrient source at the right rate, at the right time, and in the right place. Applying 4R nutrient stewardship concepts can help improve nutrient use efficiency on farms, making farms more profitable and reducing losses to the environment. So we're here today about the 2024 voucher program. So the Mid-Atlantic 4R Nutrient Stewardship Association has received grant funds from the Keith Campbell Foundation to fund 30 vouchers at $1,000 each. These vouchers will be paid directly to participating agribusinesses and certified crop advisors for the expenses associated with each enrolled farmer. This could include data entry, soil sample, map generation, etc. The purpose of our vouchers are to get farmers in the Chesapeake Bay watershed to take the next step in 4R farming and strengthen their operation with precision agricultural practices. From 2021, with our pilot program, we found that the voucher removed the financial burden to advancing farmers' familiarity with and the use of tools on their farms, and intentionally did not require the implementation of any technology. So these vouchers are currently live. You can contact myself to secure a voucher or to utilize an online form to get the ball rolling. So I will share the links in the chat box in a little bit for you guys to see more about the voucher program and to access the links. We have saved 5 vouchers for every agribusiness until January 1st, and then it will be open to a first come, first served basis. At this time, we currently have 21 vouchers available, and sign up will be a deadline of July 1st, but first come, first serve. So moving on to the reporting section of how to obtain a voucher and what to expect. So once you have confirmed your interest in a voucher, you will be asked to complete the front of our enrollment and reporting form. This is basic information about the agribusiness and CCA, and the farmer ensures everyone meets the criteria. Criteria includes that enrolled fields must have a current nutrient management plan in Delaware and in Maryland, or meet NRCS core nutrient management requirements in PA. We have had some questions about the expectations for Pennsylvania. So to clarify, we're asking that PA farmers show that they meet their core nitrogen requirements, basic nutrient management. This could be a manure management plan or the use of Act 38 template. So if you have any questions or want to touch base about that, we'd be happy to talk about that further. Moving on to, the second eligibility is to provide any proof or information to us for aggregated data, obtaining maps or variable rate images, so that we can have that for presentations and other items that we utilize in-house. And then third, we would like the participant, both the agribusiness and the farmer, to participate in a post interview with us just about your experience and ways that we can improve. Moving on to the reporting form, once the front of the form is complete, please return that to myself as soon as possible to secure your voucher. And then the second portion of the form will be due July 1st. This portion covers the planned practice, just letting us know what you're expecting to do, how many acres you're expecting to reach, and that sort of information. And then lastly, on January 1st of 2025, the final report will be due. This will confirm that practice was implemented and the results that were found. And then following that final report submission, we will touch base to schedule a short interview about the program and your experience. For payment, once all the data is collected and the interview is complete, the payment will be made to the agribusiness or the CCA, and therefore you could expect that anywhere between fall of 2024 until March of 2025, once everything is complete. Now running back to the 2021 program. In 2021, the Nature Conservancy secured funding from the Chesapeake Bay Trust for a precision ag voucher program. In partnership with the Delaware Maryland 4R Alliance, 12 farmers received $1,000 vouchers. The grant aimed to fund 10 vouchers, reach 50 farmers, and cover 1,000 acres, all of which were reached. Funding for the 2 extra vouchers came from the Nature Conservancy due to the high interest in vouchers. Participating agribusinesses were the Mill and Willards. Vouchers were used specifically in Harford County. Without requiring implementation, 2,464 acres received enhanced nutrient management practice planning, and most of these were moving forward with implementation in 2022. In September of 2021, grant funds also supported an in-person field day at Lee McDaniel's farm in Harford County. The day focused on promoting the adoption of advanced nutrient management practices. A few other things that I wanted to point out about the 2021 voucher before Tim goes into depth is that in 2021, vouchers were utilized to create subfield size management units with the goal to move towards variable rate application of nutrients. Some fields were rezoned based on their soil characteristics and their yield history. In-season nitrogen management was completed. We also saw variable rate application of phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, and sulfur, and then later maps were generated for those farms. Of these acres, an estimated savings of 6,671 pounds of nitrogen was accomplished. So with that, thank you for your time joining us today. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer those in the Q&A. You can also submit them in the chat box. With that being said, let's welcome Tim Hushen from the Mill. Tim has been with the Mill since 2007. At Penn State, he studied ag business and later interned with Dow AgriScience in the Penn State Extension Service in Lebanon County. In 2016, he became a certified crop advisor, and in 2019, he became a co-leader of the Mill's Precision Ag Solutions program. We are grateful to have Tim on the Delaware Maryland 4R steering committee and excited to hear from him on the 2021 pilot program and the 2024 voucher program. So please welcome Tim. Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. Let me get the screen sharing going. How do we look?
I got the PowerPoint. You look good.
Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. As Janelle gave a very, very nice introduction, I am Tim Hushin with the Mill. I am the Sustainable Ag Tech Director here, and we're going to cover a little bit of the previous voucher program and kind of some of our insights, at least mine, which was mostly from behind the computer screen. And then I also have one of my other team members here today, which you'll meet a little bit later, to give you kind of a more in-field review and kind of his insights. So just a little bit real quick, the Mill, we're a family-owned local independent ag retailer. And this kind of screen just kind of gives you a little bit of a snapshot about where we operate. We have 7 stores, which are the stars. 3 of those are our agronomy centers that are in the orange, and all those little red dots and lines and polygons, those are all of our connected fields. And from all the different growers that have kind of digitally shared with us, and some of the ones that we're acting on. From anything seed, fertilizer, crop protection, some of the precision stuff that we're going to go over today. And Janelle had highlighted some of the growers and kind of where they fell into each of these different buckets from the pilot voucher program. So of course we had 3 growers that had some older equipment that weren't quite up to specs as far as some wireless data transfer. So we did a little bit of some manual data pooling, trying to help just start that process, trying to help just coach them on how important that information, their yield data, any of their application maps, whatever it may be, are important just to help inform decisions into the future. We also worked with some rezoning of fields, and we'll cover a little bit of that more later, whether it was from some kind of soil sensor or using historical yield data. The variable rate P&K, phosphorus and potassium, we did a little bit of work on that from how we were rezoning those fields. And that's kind of that first bucket that we'll really cover. And then once we got in season, we were looking at nitrogen modeling and some variable rate nitrogen and sulfur applications, and then ultimately nitrogen savings from what we were able to accomplish from doing both the variable rate and the nitrogen model itself. So in that first bucket that I talked about, we had about a quarter of our growers that went through this pilot program fell into these orange boxes. So from a traditional soil sampling, moving to kind of that zone look, from a soil sensor, something like a Dualum or a Varus EM38, one of those EC carts, and trying to figure out how a variable rate fertilizer and or lime application would look, and kind of diving in through there. So when we think about, and part of the way that we were able to present this and at least catch some growers' attention for this is when we think about soil sampling and you think about a grower wanting to spread fertilizer on his fields each and every year, depending on the crop, we got to think that the ultimate goal should be to apply the optimum fertilizer rate and application each year for every crop. And because we really want to protect yield while also improving profitability. And when we look at it from the mill's perspective, when we just do a traditional composite soil sample and we look at the 4 R's, we can get the right source. So we know what NPK, whatever that may be, in the right time. But from that aspect of the composite, we might not get the right rate across the whole field. We might be able to get certain areas of the field, but not the whole field. And then that goes also into that right place. Where in that field are we applying that fertilizer? So that's when we started talking to these growers and kind of getting the zone soil sampling aspect and kind of theory, that strategy set up for them. And we were able to kind of articulate and tell them that the zone soil sampling, that philosophy assumes that nutrients and the way that they are within the field, their different levels and the patterns, is some kind of logical reason. They're not just completely random. So we try and use these different data points from the Dual-EM, the Dualum soil sensor, to run out and map these fields to try and help create these subfield management zones. Soon we get the shallow EC data and the deep EC data. And then we also are looking at topography, because we know that the high part of the field up on the hill versus the low part of the field down on the bottom, that topography is going to influence crop productivity, and nutrient availability. So we start stacking these things on top of each other and let the computer go through and mesh all these together and spit us out with some zones that we can then create for individual soil sampling. And across all the acres that we've done over the last 6-7 years, our average zone size is just under 3.5 acres. And of course, there's some that are closer to 2, and there's some that might be more like 5, 5.5, 6. A lot of that is going to depend on field size, field layout, whole topography, like we were talking about. And a lot of times with variable rates, when you look at phosphorus and potassium, the economics, growers want to try to spend less fertilizer when you start variable rating. That happens in instances, but it is definitely not all the time. You cannot guarantee that once you variable rate with your P and K, that you will reduce cost. But what we can do is once we have those individual soil samples, we can start creating a variable rate recommendation. So this one was for variable rate phosphorus with one of our voucher growers. And we were looking at MAP as our product of choice. And the average rate across that field was 110 pounds per acre. Now, he did not, that fell within probably a reasonable margin of error from what he would have from a composite soil sample. So the economics on that might not have saved him any money, but when we look at the areas where we were over applying or under applying, if that grower would have flat rated at 110 pounds per acre, 37% of those acres on that field would have been over applied. So the green and the gray areas where it was calling for 65 pounds of product or 0 pounds of product, we would have put on a whole bunch more than what was actually needed. And then on the flip side, 63% of those acres, so the yellow, orange, and red, would have been under applied. We would have been shorting that crop from the get-go. So this is how we can start to kind of flesh out and start making sense of, we may be spreading the same rate or something close to what he would be at a flat rate, but we're putting that fertilizer in a better place compared to that blanket application. And kind of very similar on the potassium side, it's about split 50-50 here, over under application and under application. But what we're trying to do is just help put that fertilizer in the best place to get a return on that investment. So, and then when we kind of transition out of that first bucket of growers, we're now into the in-season work where we were looking at probably the other 3/4 of our growers were really focusing on. Was trying to utilize some yield data, create some subfield management zones, what we call productivity zones, and then variable rate their nitrogen and sulfur on their corn acres at top dress, side dress by following that nitrogen model. And so kind of that little bit of process, we were looking at some multi-year yield data analysis. So we had yield data ranging for this grower from 2015 all the way through 2020. Well, now we have through 2022. But at the time we were looking at 2021. So we were able to take all those different yield layers and run them through a normalization process. So that's it pretty much, this normalization process converts bushels per acre to a relative yield, so that way you can go across crop, you can go across corn, soybeans, wheat, whatever it may be. And then of course you're going over multiple different years with different weather patterns and different weather conditions, because this process is going to help us understand or at least give us a better understanding of yield stability and variability across that field. So we get the darkest green areas, it's the best area of the field historically, the darkest red out on the outside edges. And I can show these maps to growers time and time again, and most of them can point and say, well, at least in this example, you can say that's a lot of woods edge, there's a lot of shading. Even if there's red out in the middle of the field, growers will really understand. And they can get pretty dang close with drawing their own map of something like this, but what this really does is actually putting their yield data to work for them. And from there, we can start looking at generating zones off of that data. and running some historical yield. So for every year that it was corn previously, we're able to run reports and say, okay, in this A area, the best area of the field, that pink, historical yield was 240 bushel. Then you get all the way out to the red, the very worst part of the field, that historically only did 127 bushel. Because what we're trying to do is understand the zones of opportunity and the zones of challenge, and trying to figure out if we can enhance any kind of productivity for one, but then ultimately profitability. And then when we started looking at what we could do, we have our historical yield, and then now we can start setting a yield goal. We can start saying, how can we capitalize on reallocating nutrients, pull some from the bottom, so those C and D, that red and green areas, and reallocate them to the top areas of the field, the A and B, to try and help best position our fertilizer and our crop to give us a better ROI potential. So once we have our yield data or our yield zones set, our productivity zones, we have our yield goals all set, we were able to go to the growers and say, okay, we're going to put this into the nitrogen model now. We're looking at an in-season recommendation assistance tool that was driven by land management, soil reports, all of our crop inputs, and then of course, real-time weather data. It starts looking at the last 30, 40 years of historical weather and puts it all on a trend line and says, okay, for this year, in this case, for 2022, where are we heading? What kind of trajectory are we on? How much more nitrogen do we need to finish out the season? And this is an example of one of those reports. So within that field, we were anywhere from 0 more pounds of N all the way up to 130 at the most, with the average field rate was about 97 pounds of nitrogen, is what the model said that field needed, that corn crop needed to finish out the season. Because we're trying to let this model help us determine the economic impact of all of our various nitrogen management decisions. And these reports, these agronomic reports, are very powerful, and it gives us the visibility into the whole field level, and then we can also drill down into each of these individual grids and each of these individual zones. And so when we looked at, Janelle talked about that, some of those nitrogen cost savings. So this was from that 2022 season. We had, of course, quite a few growers who did this because of the voucher, and then also kind of expanded some of that across some of their other acres that weren't covered by the voucher. And then we also were able to talk some additional growers that didn't receive funding into trying the variable rate nitrogen at top dress, variable rate top dress, based on the nitrogen model and the historical yield. And we were able to kind of summarize and estimate that their historical practices were about 83 units of N in season at top dress. Because of the voucher and the work that we were doing, we were able to reduce that down to 55 units of N. And that is primarily driven because of the nitrogen model and setting accurate yield goals using their historical yield data. That was about 74,000 units of N that was not applied. And most of these, the vast majority of these growers were able to follow that. Or they did follow that because of the impact that we potentially could have from a cost standpoint. They were reducing their input costs. And then also we have a lot of confidence, historical confidence in the model and how it is, the recommendations that it is generating. And with this whole voucher program, it really was very simple, very easy to walk the grower through. There was a lot of flexibility in what we could bring to the grower, kind of meet them wherever they were at within that spectrum. And there was no actual requirements for implementation. We were really just trying to coach them on how they could use their data. And I think I just mentioned a little while ago, there was a couple growers that we took this $1,000 to them and said, hey, we want to do that, but now we want to do it on a lot more acres because you've given us the confidence that you're backing it with some of this voucher money. plus the historical success that you all have had with these practices. So let's expand and go further than just what the voucher is going to cover. Because really, when we think about the 4 R's in the voucher, we're really just trying to match the plant demand and balancing all of our NPK applications, because we really just want to boost use efficiency of fertilizer, because we want to protect yield, reduce environmental impacts, and then also improve profitability. And so this was I kind of gave you the quick run through of the view from behind the computer, which is mostly where I was for this pilot program and will be for the 2024 season and that voucher program. But I want to introduce, and had the privilege to introduce, one of our other team members, David Boniface, who's the agronomist for the bulk of the growers that were involved with this, and just kind of let him give you a little bit of insight into how some of those conversations went during that time period, and then kind of further on down the road.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I do want to thank the 4R Alliance for giving those vouchers out in 2021. That was huge for me and the mill. That really pushed my growers, and they always need a little push. It pushed them over to try something different out of their wheelhouse. And like Tim just said, there's multiple growers in 2022, and I'm planning 2023 and planning in 2024 that they're going to continue doing what we had set up for them in 21. And there's no voucher that I've offered them yet. So they're willing to keep progressing. Their yields have been very good. 9 times out of 10, when they do the nitrogen model, they're putting less nitrogen on their corn at top dressing. That is saving them money. It seems kind of weird that I want them to use less fertilizer because the mill is going to make less money. But when that grower is making money, we are doing well, and they gain our respect. And I can sell them something to help improve their soil, like a humic acid or more cover crops, because it's so important not only to put the right nutrients down at the right time, but to feed the soil and improve the soil, because we're not getting any more. So the adapt-in has been huge for me. Tim and Joe make me look good. They run the DAS at the mill. I get the fields and tell them what we want, crop-wise, what crops going in and the yield goal. And they set some parameters for us, myself and the grower. And then I've had a number of growers say there's no way that corn doesn't need any more nitrogen for this year. And we still put a little bit on half the field, and then there's no difference. So it has really been eye-opening with the nitrogen model to a lot of these growers. And putting the nitrogen on at different times for a corn crop. Split applications of nitrogen. This is very important, especially when you go all the way back to a soil sample. And you sit down with the grower and show them their CEC, show them the organic matter. When you have a low CEC, the soil can only take so much nitrogen at one time. The corn is only going to take up so much nitrogen with the lower CEC. So it's very important to sit down with the grower and go through that and explain to them. And it definitely helps their yield, and we've got data to prove that. So again, Tim talked about one of our growers where we had the meeting, Indian Springs. He was only going to do half. The voucher helped us talk him into doing all his variable rate top dressing, and it worked out very well. He saved a lot of money, and his yield was increased. Stabilizers is another thing. You can see that top right picture, that blue purple color, that is a nitrogen stabilizer on the urea, which helps keep that nitrogen where it's supposed to be. That is huge. That's a huge part. And when you get into trying to get people to sign up for this, Maryland's tough because a lot of these Maryland farmers some of them are using stabilizers, some of them are split applications, some of them are planting cover crops. But there's usually one tool we can find to help them make a difference. And it might be a new product, or it might be stabilizing their nitrogen. So very important. The dualum has been huge for us, running across the fields and getting the different soil types, getting the different topography, putting the fertilizer where it's supposed, where it should be, where their highest yield potential is. I had a grower last week say, well, you know, the first 12 rows isn't going to do any good because of the deer. Well, it's a bigger zone than the first 12 rows. So it's just a matter of me and the rest of the agronomists at the mill explaining to the growers the potential of this. So thanks to the 4R Alliance for providing us with these vouchers. It has really helped us to kick it into gear, and it's helped me gain respect from my growers. Absolutely. Tim brought up a good point. I don't know how well the yields were all throughout the United States, but in Harford County, they were phenomenal. And when we work with a grower and he has used the Adapt-In, the nitrogen modeling tool, and he sees the results at the end through his yield monitor and through all his data, and then we can compile that and sit down with him, it's a no-brainer for next year for us to continue working with that grower. So this has been huge for the mill, and we look forward to working with the 4R Alliance years to come.
So now I think that wraps up our official PowerPoint slides anyway.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for that presentation. And having you both here is definitely very valuable and important. So thank you for taking the time to do that. At this time, we're here to answer any questions about the voucher program, what we had in the past. If there are some, you're welcome to put them in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute. And everything will be recorded, so I'm just letting you know, no big deal. We will be sharing this on our YouTube page for those who were unable to make it today.
If there are any questions in the chat, are you going to read them out loud, or should I go to find them?
I can read them out loud if they pop up.
That would be perfect.
We gotta give everyone another minute. If you are on the phone and you're muted, you can push *6 to unmute.
Yeah, and again, just while any of those may be coming in, I think the one of the real beauties of the voucher program is just the simplicity of signing up, the ease of payment, the limited requirements, honestly, and just kind of the wide scope that we're able to work with. And I mean, I know you guys have the 5 vouchers per agribusiness, at least now, in that limit. This week, we should be wrapping up our 5th, finally, getting that 5th grower to kind of sit down. So we will be chomping at the bit for that, kind of the rest of them to open up, just because we know how, kind of I went through some of the data, and David talked about the success that his growers have had because of that, and how they carried through.
Sure. We did have one question come in the chat. It says, based on the voucher work, has communication with your customers changed?
Absolutely. That, like I said, that voucher really helped me get at their kitchen table. That's where all the work happens, you know, in late fall and wintertime. The biggest goal for us is to have a plan before spring hits, because nobody has time in the spring. One other thing I wanted to mention, I can talk till I'm blue in my face, and I've done it, but I've had a number of growers talking to other growers in the area, and then they'll come to me and say, well, why didn't you tell me about the voucher? Or why didn't you tell me about Adapt-In? and I'm like, I did. And, it just takes another grower to talk at Bob Evans or Delta Family Restaurant, and then they come back with great ideas. And I'm glad they thought of it, but you get, when you tell them 100 times, you're like, okay, but let's let somebody else tell them, and then it'll be their idea. So that's great.
Thank you. We have another question coming in. It says, what is the expectation at the end of the voucher process? I'm still a little confused on what it is you're looking for at the end of the year. So I can start with that one. And if you guys have anything to chime in, happy to. So the voucher program is here in place to just take our farmers to the next step in 4R farming. We know that farmers are all on a different spectrum of 4R farming. So just looking towards precision nutrient management to some level. For some farmers, it's going to be the very beginning start, and some farmers, it's going to be that next prescription reading, prescription writing. So there's a broad spectrum there that we can fill. And if you have some suggestions or ideas, or if you have a farmer who wants to try something, let us know and we'll be happy to talk about that. One more question came in the chat. Do the layers important for subfield zone establishment change from farm to farm? For instance, there are farms where topography maps, soil maps are very useful, and other farms where the same layer is not useful at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to key in on exactly where that grower's at and really what the goal is, what they're trying to tackle, what nutrient or a couple nutrients they really want to do. Do they want to do variable rate on everything? Do they want to do variable rate on just one or two things? But yes, the different data layers, and then also what data is available. So whether it's topography or, because I mean, that is readily available if you have any kind of GIS software. You can kind of have that already within that profile tree a lot of times. But if you want to add any of those other layers, whether it's yield data, of course you have to have historical yield data from the grower, or being able to run some kind of soil sensor sled over to get any kind of that EC. So there's some data that is available. I tend not to go with the publicly available data as much. I don't put a whole lot of weight on that, because a lot of it's generalities, where I'd rather use something that's actually happened within that field. Hopefully that covered that question.
I'll give him a time to respond. Are there any other questions? You're welcome to unmute or use the chat box. All right, while I wait for a minute, I'm going to put the link to the Maryland, Pennsylvania, and CCA credits in the chat box now, and then I'm going to get off Zoom and I'm going to get you the link for the Delaware nutrient management credits for one to apply for a non-approved event.
Hello, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I thought in the beginning, Janelle, you said something about each company can get up to 5 vouchers until after a certain date or whatever. Those 5 vouchers, could they be used any way we see fit? Could it go to one grower at one time and use all that, or how does that work?
That's a good question. I would have to touch base with Lindsay, who's on another call, just to confirm, unless Kristen knows, who's online. I'm not entirely sure. I don't want to tell you something incorrect.
Makes sense. And that was the question about the at the end of the whole experience. Come at the end of the year, you're getting ready to turn in whatever it is that you're expected to turn in. That kind of was my question. What is it that you turn in and say, this is what we did, this is our experience, this is what we collected? For example, if it is the beginning of a process with a guy and all I did with a grower was help them take some yield monitor maps and develop some zones. What, and that was as far as I got with the guy. What does that entail? And is that honestly $1,000?
So I'm just processing. Unfortunately, I was out on maternity leave during the 2021 pilot program. So
Janelle, I can jump in if you want. Yep. So at least from our side, and I know what I submitted for each of our growers for the pilot program. So whichever piece of technology that the growers latched on to, whether it was variable rate application, whether it was nitrogen modeling, whether it was in your example, taking yield data and generating zones. I had two things. One, I had just had a simple Word document. It wasn't even a full page most of the time. It just kind of outlined the very basic things you talked about. Here, we took yield data, we generated zones. Here's how many acres and zones we made, just some very basic info. And then I also just had some PDF reports from our GIS software they're able to run and just say, here are examples of those fields and those maps and what they look like. Because that was kind of our proof at that point that something was done. That was us validating that report. And then, so it was very
basic.
Yes.
Simple.
It was.
That's kind of what I didn't know if you had to have this, 25-page report as you have to for some things that you got to deal with in this industry or not. But no, that sounds good. All right. Thank you very much.
no problem. Thank you for the questions, and I will get back to you with the other one you had. Eric Rosenbaum with Road Trees Consulting, said that if you're looking to get your PA nutrient management credits, to put your name and your certification number in the chat, and he will be managing that. So if you are doing Pennsylvania, please do it that way for him. And then while we have you online, we do have a few other opportunities that the Mid-Atlantic 4R team is currently working with. So we have cost share for the split nitrogen program. This is the final year of funding for that. It will be to $20 an acre to the farmer. So in theory, you're applying the same total pound of nitrogen across your field, and then you'll have an additional pass through there for the control. We are doing an agribusiness incentive of $500 for a farmer. So if you want to work directly with the farmer and then just coordinate with me on who you signed up and gather the results, please let me know, and we'll be happy to get you on the books for 2024 corn crop. And then with that same program, we are looking into doing some biological cost shares. I believe it's also going to be $20 an acre. We're meeting on Friday to finalize that protocol, so we'll keep you guys posted. But if you guys are interested, please reach out to myself if you're in Delaware or Maryland, and then you can reach out to Eric in Pennsylvania if you're interested.
Hey, Janelle, this is Kristen. Can you hear me?
I can.
Hey, sorry, I'm driving and had trouble getting unmuted and also trouble hearing some of the questions. But I think the question that was brought up about what can it be used for? In the pilot program, it was one voucher per farmer. And it could be used for anything related to 4R as long as it was a new thing, something that the producer hadn't done before or hadn't done before on those acres. So I'm not sure if that completely answers the question, but hopefully it helps.
Yeah, Kristen, and to follow that up, someone asked if, they were going to be doing $2,000 work for a farmer. Could they do 2 vouchers for that one farmer, or would they only be limited to 1 voucher per farmer, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and all I can say is that I don't think we've addressed that directly for this year. In the previous year, we did it. It was 1 per farmer, and then anything over and above the voucher was, what the farmer paid for the difference. So we can regroup on that question to make sure we want to run it the same way, but I would assume that's how we plan to run it this year as well.
Thank you, Kristen. That's what I assumed, but I wanted to confirm with everyone as well.
Janelle, I can jump in and share a little bit on this too. It is $1,000 voucher. There's nothing in the voucher that requires you to do 100% of your customers' acres. So if you know what your hourly rate is and you divide it by that $1,000 voucher and you get how many hours you feel you can spend on the project, pick a realistic acreage that you can do. If your customer farms 12 different farms, maybe this voucher allows you to do work on 3 of them, and that's perfectly okay.
Thank you, Eric. That's great feedback for sure. Are there any other questions either in the chat or you're welcome to unmute? All right, we still have some PA certifications coming in the chat box. So if you are looking for PA nutrient management credits, please complete the form that way. Otherwise, the link for the other credits are also in the chat box. If you are in need of credits and you joined by a phone call, please give me a call or shoot me an email following today's webinar, and I will get everything filled out for you. All right, thank you guys for your time. I'll give you 10 minutes back. We'll share the recording once it's up. If you have any questions, please contact our team and we'll be happy to keep you guys moved.
Janelle, thank you for the opportunity to share our experience from the mill with everyone who joined today too.
No problem. I appreciate you guys being here today and having your experience. That's for sure important. Have a good
Always.
holidays.